A frozen body was found curled up grotesquely inside a wooden bird's nest, a symbol of shelter now transformed into a silent tomb. This cruel contrast was not just an ordinary murder, but the work of a twisted serial killer who considered himself the ultimate judge. When investigators realized the horrifying truth, they were unknowingly drawn into a deadly game of hide-and-seek and had become the killer's next target. While sitting on a bus, a girl named Zara suddenly received a secretly recorded video of herself at that very moment. The camera showed her looking down at her phone, indicating the person filming was right beside her. She quickly looked around, feeling that anyone could be the culprit, but no one showed the slightest hint of vulnerability. Just then, she received a text message. After arriving at the bus stop, she hurriedly got off the bus and rushed home. This person had been secretly filming her for months. During that time, she changed her phone number, reported it to the police countless times, but still couldn't find out who it was. He was like a ghost, silently infiltrating her life. But today was clearly different. As soon as she got home, she received a second message. This was clearly a deadly warning. After locking the door, she pondered for a long time, still unable to understand the intentions of the person filming her. Then he sent another video. At first, the video showed Zara walking home, then it switched to a first-person perspective. This time, it showed the person filming her walking straight to her front door. She hurried to the window to see if he was still there when a third message arrived. The next day, the police department received a report. Officer Naia from the Cybercrime Center was sent to Zara's house to investigate the network. Upon arriving at the scene, Naia learned the basic information about the victim, Zara, a 41-year-old divorced woman. She had been missing for about 12 hours. She had recently taken sick leave due to immense stress. Because she had been repeatedly reporting to the police that she was being followed, the police department had assigned Naia to assist in the search. The person who reported the disappearance was Zara's ex-husband. He had discovered Zara was missing at 9 p.m. the previous night when he brought their daughter home, prompting him to call the police. After searching the house, the police couldn't find her phone. After understanding the situation, Naia went to Zara's bedroom to examine the crime scene. On the table, she found anti-stress medication. In the drawer, she found a small knife and pepper spray. These items were sufficient evidence that Zara was in a state of extreme nervous tension. Just then, Zara's daughter appeared at the door. The girl provided Naia with some crucial information. Zara always told her daughter about her errands whenever she went out. She absolutely did not leave without a word. Moreover, someone had been to Zara's house before the police arrived. She never cleaned the kitchen. It was always her daughter who did it. But this time, the kitchen was unusually clean, enough to indicate someone had been there. This unusual cleaning of the crime scene wasn't to destroy evidence, but rather a display of the suspect's extreme desire for control. He could freely enter the victim's private space, even cleaning the house for her. Through this, he declared his absolute control over the victim's life. This is a symbolic act of power control serial killers. Fortunately, Zara's tablet was left in the bedroom. After Naia unlocked the tablet, she discovered a large amount of videos and messages that the person who secretly filmed her had sent to Zara. When they scrolled to the end, which was the time Zara disappeared, they found a nursery rhyme composed in text messages. Next came those 3 messages. Naia immediately tracked the IP address of the stalker, but she discovered that these emails all originated from Eastern Europe. Therefore, she couldn't trace them yet. Strangely, this IP address had been recorded in other cases. 2 years ago, a 19-year-old girl named Emma was also stalked and tragically died. To this day, the perpetrator remains unaccounted for. Naia suggested to her superiors that the 2 cases be combined for processing. At this time, Zara was being held captive in the house across the street. Seeing Naia arrive to investigate, Zara tried with all her might to make noise, but the stalker gave her no chance and knocked her unconscious. Back at the police station, Naia reported what she knew to her superiors. Her superiors were suspicious as to why the same perpetrator would target a 19-year-old female student and a 41-year-old divorced designer. The circumstances of these 2 women were completely different. Furthermore, before her death, Emma, besides being followed, did not receive any text messages or nursery rhymes. Currently, Zara's whereabouts remain unknown. Therefore, superiors can only conduct a routine investigation according to standard procedures and send Mark from the Violent Crime Investigation Team to assist. While forensic investigators were searching the house, police found 2 surveillance camera videos from Zara's neighbor's house. At the time of the crime, Naia saw a construction company vehicle parked opposite Zara's house. However, before she could investigate the driver's identity, she was informed that the case had been closed. She rushed to Zara's house. house. A colleague told her that Zara had sent a text message to her ex-husband. Watching the police pack up and leave one by one, Zara was filled with fear. She tried to make noise to find her, but it was ultimately in vain. Naia stayed at the scene, while Mark went to the police station that had investigated Emma's case. The clues from that time were very well preserved. Mark carefully examined each photograph. When he had someone send Emma's file to his phone, he learned that the case had been dropped. At that moment, a yellow sticky note caught Mark's attention. The police officer in charge of the case told him that this was what the stalker had sent to Emma. The nursery rhyme had been sent a few days before Emma disappeared. Mark, with his keen perception, recognized the connection between the two cases. He hurried to find Naia. They both returned to Zara's house. Naia called the airport and learned that Zara hadn't boarded the plane. This proved that someone wanted to slow down the police. Mark realized that the timing of Zara's message to her ex-husband could be a crucial clue. Naia recalled that Zara sent the message at 12:30 p.m., right when the forensic team arrived. Thinking that the culprit might be in the house across the street, monitoring all police actions, Mark and Naia rushed over there. In a moment of urgency, Naia cautiously searched the house, drawing her gun. In one room, they found a chair placed directly opposite Zara's front door, with scuff marks on the armrests and dried blood on the seat. Before they could analyze the situation further, Naia received a phone call. Zara's body had been found. She was curled up and placed in a wooden bird's nest. The bird's nest, a symbol of protection and nurturing life, had been used by the killer to hold the body. He used the symbol of life to contrast with the coldness of death. This showed a twisted, extreme psychology, a self-proclaimed judge. The police then combined the cases to investigate. Naia found a video in Zara's inbox showing the killer walking towards her house from a first-person perspective. After searching surveillance cameras in the area where the video was recorded, they discovered the killer always moved in the blind spots of the cameras. Furthermore, the IP addresses of the emails and videos sent were professionally masked, making it impossible for the police to trace them. By analyzing images from the two crime scenes, Mark came to a conclusion. Both Emma and Zara had been stalked before their deaths and had received messages containing nursery rhymes. Mark suggested reviewing the stalking cases to see if anyone else had experienced similar situations. Since Emma's case happened 2 years ago, Mark sought out Mary, her mother, to learn more details. He laid out the photos on the table. Besides Zara's photos, there were also pictures of her network of relationships. Mark did this to find common ground between Emma and Zara, and thus connect the dots. But after careful observation, Mary didn't recognize anyone. She said her daughter had a wide network of contacts and was very good at communicating, so even she didn't know all of her daughter's relationships. However, Mary provided a clue. When Emma was alive, she had a boyfriend named Omar. Before Emma died, Omar was always clinging to her. Just then, a loud noise came from outside the door. It turned out that for the past 2 years, Mary hadn't gotten over Emma's death. This made it impossible for the son to understand his mother's psychology. He even developed a defense mechanism. Every time Mary mentioned Emma, he reacted in his own way. This was a severe psychological trauma, typical in families that have experienced the death of a loved one. He had been ignored by his mother for a long time, due to his sister's death, so he could only use rebellion to resist, but essentially, he craved attention. This also buried an important clue for the later developments. Seeing this, Mark suddenly said that the social impact of a serial murder case is completely different from a single case. If Mary released this information, the public pressure the police department would face would be unprecedented. After all, they had investigated for 2 years without catching the killer and let him strike again. But out of sympathy for Mary, Mark still told the truth. Just as Naia and Mark were arguing, she unexpectedly received a phone call. Through their investigation, the police found a man named Anders. His experience was very similar to the 2 previous victims. He received a secretly recorded video of himself putting his child to sleep. He angrily stormed out of the house to find the person who filmed him, but there wasn't a soul around. Just as he turned to go home, his phone received another text message with a nursery rhyme, counting to 1, counting to 2, wondering if the person's eldest son was asleep yet. Anders didn't think much of it. The next day at work, he learned that the person who filmed him had done something even worse. His superior called Anders into the office and showed him an email sent to all employees. Below was a message advising Anders to report it to the police. But he said he had reported it many times because he had been secretly filmed, but the police dismissed it as malicious prank and didn't take it seriously. In reality, nearly 80 cases of stalking and harassment are initially dismissed as civil disputes or jokes. The police intervention threshold is very high, and perpetrators often exploit this loophole to escalate harassment into violence, even murder. Therefore, his superiors had no better option than to tell him to return to work. However, before he could even sit down, he received another secretly recorded video. It seemed to have been filmed that morning, showing him saying goodbye to his wife before going to work, along with messages saying, at 6, at 7. Anders was having an affair and had a child with someone else. At this point, he couldn't take it anymore. Today, he absolutely had to settle this matter once and for all. He called his wife and told her to lock the doors. He would then go to the country cabin. He wanted to catch the person who secretly filmed him there to end everything, but he didn't know that it was actually a deadly curse. The two previous victims had also received this same incantation before they died. Mark and Naia quickly went to Anders' company to investigate the situation. Because the person secretly filming him kept sending messages, Anders frequently changed his phone number, making it difficult for the police to contact him at the moment. There they found the email, along with the nursery rhyme message. When their superior called Anders' wife and learned he had arrived at the log cabin, Mark and Naia rushed there. Anders had already arrived at the log cabin. While stacking firewood, his phone received a secretly recorded video. Unable to contain himself any longer, he grabbed a piece of wood nearby and stormed out. After cursing for a while, the culprit still didn't appear. When he returned home, he discovered the fireplace had been burned. He froze for a second as he stepped through the door. Immediately, his phone received a message. The killer had perfectly repeated the hunting rhythm of the two previous cases. First, the killer used long-term surveillance to break down the victim's psychological defenses. Then, he used the nursery rhyme message to officially announce the start of the hunt. He held the victim's life and death in his hands throughout the process. Now, Anders began to feel afraid. He was about to drive away, but the assailant had already ambushed him and electrocuted him, rendering him unconscious. When the two police officers arrived at the wooden house, they found it in complete disarray. After calling the forensic team to the scene, they went to find Anders' wife, Annika, to question her. It was learned that Anders and his ex-wife Sophie had a very strained relationship. Sophie wouldn't let Anders see their son, so he always suspected her of secretly filming him. After finding Sophie's address, they tracked her down. She recounted how, when they got married, Anders was very poor. After getting a promotion and earning a lot of money, he didn't hesitate to abandon her to marry someone new. Therefore, she refused to let him see their son, and they now only communicate through a lawyer. Just as Sophie was telling her story, Anders was found tied up in the house across the street, struggling to stay afloat. Initially, Anders was quite lucky. Mark went into the baby's room to check on it, and, while glancing out the window, saw a figure swaying back and forth in the house across the street. He hurriedly called Naia over, unaware that the killer had been lurking nearby. Seeing Anders free from his restraints, the killer stabbed him forcefully in the neck with a short knife. When Mark and Naia arrived, Anders lay dead in a pool of blood. While they were investigating the case, Mary kept reminiscing about her daughter. Emma had been a student teacher at the school. Today, the school was holding a basketball game, and Mary was watching from the sidelines. Just then, she heard her son say that Omar was working in the school cafeteria. Mary went to the cafeteria to ask Omar about Emma. It was then that Mary learned that after breaking up with Omar, Emma had a new boyfriend. Mary realized that perhaps she didn't understand her daughter as well as she thought. She went into her daughter's room, reopened the computer, and logged into her social media accounts to look for clues. After a busy day, Naia unexpectedly received a video sent by a secret camera. It appeared to be footage from the time Anders' murder occurred. She hurriedly called Mark to explain the situation. Just as she hung up, her text message rang. "Want to come down and play hide and seek?" Another name had been added to the list of potential victims. The evil enemy was using a bizarre nursery rhyme to complete another precise hunt. Naia and Mark finally reached the core clue to the case. Unexpectedly, they became the next target. The police were frantically reviewing surveillance records and found another potential victim, named Dit. The two most recent victims, Zara and Anders, had both gone to the Family Justice Department to process their divorce. Naia believed this department was the link between the victims. To prove this, they went to the Family Justice Department to ask if Zara and Anders had ever met and if they had the same specialist. The officer checked the records and said their specialists were different. According to their schedules, the two couples arrived at different times, so they certainly didn't know each other. Seeing this, Mark had to back down, but the person in charge found Dee's address and gave it to them. When they drove there, only her ex-husband Peter was there. He said Dee had moved out a long time ago. He didn't know where she lived either. They only met at the Family Justice Department. Lately, Peter hadn't even seen his daughter. Seeing that they couldn't get anything out of Peter, Mark and Naia returned to the police station to investigate Deet's relationships again. Just then, Naia's father, a retired veteran police officer, arrived at the station. He listened to Naia's account of the recent stalker case. He said that even though it happened 30 years ago, he always felt that these cases were connected. After receiving the file, the police found Deet's address. Seeing Naia and Mark leave the police station, Peter immediately sat up straight in his car. After they drove away, he followed them. At this time, Deet was preparing to move house. Lately, someone has been constantly sending her secretly recorded messages, driving her almost insane. Counting down, she realized this lesbian woman wasn't her husband's true love. Seeing this message, Deet quickly sat in the driver's seat, about to start the engine. Just then, someone knocked on the car window. Deet recounted her marriage to Peter. Peter was a controlling man. After they got married, he treated her like his personal possession. He not only decided what she wore, but also monitored who she met. Whenever something displeased him, he would physically abuse her. This form of psychological manipulation is the most insidious form of domestic violence. The abuser uses prolonged self-deprecation, surveillance, and isolation to destroy the victim's self-perception, causing them to gradually believe it's their fault. Eventually, they lose all ability to resist. That's why Deet fled with her daughter. But instead, she was met with endless secretly recorded messages and videos, driving her almost to madness. She kept changing her phone number and address, but to no avail. Deet was also adamant that the person secretly filming her was Peter. Mark and Naia disagreed. They showed photos of the two victims first. Both were divorced due to infidelity, both had children, and both lived in the Copenhagen area. Deet's circumstances matched, so Naia asked Deet to recall if she had ever met these two men, and if so, where and when. But Deet couldn't remember. Based on Peter's previous behavior, Naia helped Deet obtain a restraining order against him. She also assigned 2 police officers to protect her. While reviewing the videos Deet received, Naia found a crucial clue. The video was filmed in Peter's own house. If Peter was the one secretly filming, his actions would be completely unnecessary. Therefore, the person secretly filming could only be the perpetrator of the serial murders. This was the killer's most cunning move. He exploited the family conflicts of each victim and disguised himself as their enemy. Mary diverted the attention of the police and the victim to those around her, while she continued her crimes in the shadows. While Naia and Mark were investigating, Mary ransacked her daughter's room. Seeing the mess, she went in to ask why. It turned out Mary had heard Emma's ex-boyfriend say that Emma had a new boyfriend before being attacked. So Mary was searching the room to find out who the culprit was. Seeing this, Scene advised Mary that Emma had been gone for 2 years, and she should let go of the matter. She shouldn't let herself wallow in pessimism. Signy's comforting words seemed to calm Mary down. But after regaining her composure, she went to find her daughter's friend to get information. Under Mary's questioning, Emma's friend accidentally revealed that there was a list among the female students. On it were the guys they wanted to date. There were teachers over there. Realizing her slip of the tongue, the girl quickly changed the subject. But Mary remembered. Later, Mary secretly observed the girl's behavior and discovered that she was indeed very close to Mr. Bow, the teacher. So Mary went to the administrative office, using the excuse of wanting to check a student's old exam scores to get the login password. Mary used the system to check Emma's timetable. After reviewing it, she discovered the name Bow. His message only angered her further. Mary confronted Bow, asking if he had any romantic relationships with female students and if he had murdered her daughter. A heated argument ensued. The principal called both of them into his office, advised Mary to calm down, and promised to investigate the matter thoroughly. Meanwhile, Peter received a phone call informing him that the visitation limit imposed by Deet had reduced his visitation rights from 3 times a month to 1. He didn't know what he had done wrong to be treated this way. His car was parked right below the Family Justice Department's lobby. He intended to confront her to vent his anger. He explained his situation at the reception desk, but because he had no appointment, the receptionist firmly refused him entry. So he took a rifle from his car. Armed with a gun, he kicked open every room door, relentlessly shouting Deet's name. Alarm sounds echoed through the stairwell. Security personnel rushed upstairs reporting the situation, but Peter used his gun to subdue them. Hunting is a very prevalent culture in Northern Europe. Citizens can legally own hunting rifles simply by passing a test. At this moment, Naia was on her way to Peter's house. Although she didn't know who the culprit was, the harm Peter had inflicted on Deet was real. Therefore, Naia intended to have a serious talk with him. Seeing no one home, Naia opened Peter's computer to look at the photos he had taken. At first, they seemed normal, but later, it became clear they were secretly filmed. He had even added horror effects. Naia realized Peter was problematic, so she quickly instructed the security guards to be careful. Then, she immediately went to the Family Justice Department. The police guarding Dide told her not to worry, but immediately afterward, a gunshot rang out in the hallway. Peter burst through the door. The lawyer tried to calm Peter down, but another gunshot rang out. Peter grabbed Didi by the hair and dragged her outside. Naia was searching for Didi. Then the two encountered each other. Naia urged Peter to put down his gun, but he pointed it at Didi's head and forced her to kneel. Naia tried to persuade Peter, but Didi suddenly shoved him. He immediately chained up the grass. Despite being shot in the stomach, Naia still tried to chase after them. Reaching the main road, Naia staggered. She pulled back her bulletproof vest, only managing a quick glance at her wound before collapsing in pain. When Mark arrived, he only saw a figure covered by a white sheet. He carefully lifted the sheet, revealing Naia's face underneath. No one expected her to collapse in a pool of blood. The police immediately launched a citywide manhunt. They quickly found Peter's car at a highway toll booth, but both Peter and Didi had vanished. After searching the surrounding houses, the police obtained a clue from a taxi driver that Peter had taken a taxi to a motel. This motel was the same place where he and Didi had held their wedding. He had tied her tightly to a chair. After everything that had happened today, she deeply understood that saving her life was the most important thing. She pretended to obey his every command and tried to gain his trust. She used the excuse of going to the kitchen to make him coffee, but in reality, she was secretly observing for a window to escape through. While she was looking around for an opportunity, she saw him turn away. She quickly found a hammer on the dining table, but at that moment, the motel lost power, so she had to use the hammer as a weapon for self-defense. She softly called Peter's name as she cautiously made her way outside. Just as her spirits were about to collapse from the darkness that enveloped the motel, a strange nursery rhyme suddenly rang out. Seeing that Peter didn't respond, Didi groped her way towards the source of the sound. As she walked towards the telephone, the nursery rhyme had just finished playing. When Mark led the police to the scene, they found only the cold bodies of Peter and Didi on the floor. After forensic experts issued an autopsy report concluding that Peter had murdered Didi, Peter then chose death as atonement. The police meticulously examined the scene and found the murder weapon. The wounds inflicted by this knife perfectly matched those in the previous Zara and Anders cases. Combined with the shooting committed by Peter at the Family Justice Department, the police believed all the victims had a superficial connection to a divorce dispute. Therefore, they concluded that Peter was the sole perpetrator of the serial murders. But Mark disagreed with this conclusion. He always felt the real killer was someone else. After carefully reviewing the forensic report, he called the forensic team. They said that possibility existed, but the probability was extremely low. Seeing this, Mark decided to find clues himself. He repeatedly reviewed the surveillance camera footage of Peter's shooting. Finally, he discovered that at the very moment Naia fell, a strange car slowly glided across the bridge. This discovery immediately excited Mark. He rushed to the motel to ask the forensic team if they could find tire tracks in front of the door, but they said the door was on asphalt, making it difficult to get clear tracks. They advised Mark not to have too much hope. Mark went around asking residents, hoping to find a witness. Finally, he got an answer from a man. On the day of the murder, the man saw a strange car parked in front of his house. He had never seen it before. Mark immediately took a screenshot from the security camera and asked if he could identify the two cars by their wheel rims. The man said he wasn't sure, but his house had security cameras. Mark could copy the footage for comparison. Mark quickly sent the video to his colleagues and compared the cars in the two videos to see if they were the same. If it was, they would have to thoroughly investigate how that car came and went without anyone noticing. Thinking back to a similar case 30 years ago, Mark was convinced that the old and new cases were connected. He retrieved the old interrogation files and video recordings. He meticulously examined the perpetrator's actions, a 41-year-old truck driver named Stahl. He eventually confessed to killing the 3 children. Halfway through the video, Mark heard Stahl humming that nursery rhyme. At this point, Mark was finally certain that there was an essential connection between these cases. Mark planned to start by examining the connections from the old case to trace the intersection with the new one. The old case hadn't been publicly disclosed by the police. The children's bodies were found in a bird's nest. Therefore, the perpetrator of the current case must have known Stahl or been extremely knowledgeable about the details of that case. This would significantly narrow down the scope of the investigation. Stahl's wife had died 11 years earlier. According to the police records of the case that year, the only people closely associated with Stahl were a murderous neighbor and a teacher at his school. When Mark compiled this information and reported it to his superiors, they didn't want it to cause any more trouble. They ordered Mark to surrender his gun and not participate in the case anymore. They even decided to give Mark a few days off to rest and recover. Mark agreed to their arrangements, but he didn't give up. He secretly remembered someone to compare the DNA information from the old case with the new one. After completing this task, he went to find Stahl's former teacher. From the teacher, Mark learned that Stahl had a daughter. After his case was exposed, his wife and daughter left the area. As for the nursery rhyme, it was a folk song passed down from childhood in the local area. Everyone there knew how to sing it since they were young. Mark contacted Stahl's neighbor. Perhaps due to a long period of inactivity, the neighbor appeared somewhat deranged and spoke incoherently. Mark couldn't find any useful clues from him. Just then, the DNA matching results came in good news. Mark finally determined that this wasn't a simple copycat crime, but a case of criminal revenge. The perpetrator not only inherited his father's methods, but also his distorted values and morbid obsession with judgment. Now that there was concrete evidence, his superiors had to agree to let Mark restart the investigation. At this time, Mary also learned the truth from the principal. Bo had indeed dated an older female student, but she wasn't Emma. On the day Emma died, several people saw Bo's wife picking him up. The police had taken their statements. This meant Bo had a complete alibi. Not long after, the police contacted Mary to inform her that the murderer of Emma had been found. The burden in her heart was finally lifted. Mary went to the garage to prepare to donate or dispose of Emma's belongings. She felt her stubbornness had dissipated. It was time for her to adjust her mindset and look towards a brighter future. In the garage, Mary discovered a strange new hat with the words, "Keep up the excellence, girl." No one in the house knew where the hat came from, but they didn't think much of it. After dealing with the belongings, Mary confided in her best friend. Mary had thought she would finally let go of the burden, but she felt that feeling hadn't arrived. She could only console herself that what was meant to be over would always be over. Just as Mary was moving a cabinet in Emma's room, a piece of paper fell out from under it. It read, "Keep shining, my Roy." Mary immediately thought of the hat in the garage. She quickly logged into Emma's social media account and searched for Roy's name in the visitor history, but she found no record of him. She searched using keywords like maintain excellence, but found nothing. Mary suddenly remembered Emma had worked part-time when she was alive. She quickly checked Emma's work schedule and sure enough found babysitting at Roy's house. Mary decided to confront Roy directly. When Mary knocked on Roy's door, there was no response. Mary went around the lawn to the back of the house and looked through the window, but saw no one inside. Someone was inside, staring coldly at her. Mary quickly called Sini and told her about her discovery of the note. Hearing that Mary had arrived at Roy's house, Sini quickly told her to leave immediately. If Roy was indeed the murderer, Mary was now in mortal danger. Mary's best option was to go home first. The two of them discussed their strategy. Sini's reasoning was sound, so Mary followed her advice. After arriving home, Mary relentlessly searched online for information about Roy. Just then, Sini entered. Mary was still rambling on about her discovery. When Mary read out Roy's wife's name, Sine suddenly used a stun gun to knock her unconscious. Then Sine took Mary to her secret cabin. When Mary woke up, she had been tightly bound to a chair by Sine with duct tape. Sine coldly told Mary not to be afraid. She assured her that Mary would not survive. Sine had even written a suicide note for Mary beforehand, intending to make Mary's death a perfect accident. Sine claimed she killed Emma only out of necessity and that she and Roy had a happy family. They also had 2 lovely children. Every day felt like paradise. Therefore, Sine could only choose to kill Emma to protect the sacred marriage in her heart. Mark was completely unaware of everything that was happening. He investigated and found out that Stahl's daughter had been in a reformatory, so he immediately went there to inquire about the situation. When he received the file from the person in charge, Mark found an old photo in it. According to the person in charge, the location in the photo was the scene of Stahl's crime years ago. Whenever Stahl's daughter was upset or in a bad mood, she would go there and stay for a while. At that moment, the police called Mark. After the father checked the names, he discovered that Stahl's daughter had changed her name a long time ago. Her current name is Signe, and she married Roy in 2012. More importantly, Signe works at the Family Justice Department. She used this identity to get acquainted with all the victims. Hearing that the police were currently unable to contact Signe, Mark decisively went immediately to the log cabin mentioned by the officer. At the same time, the police, along with forensic experts, arrived at Signe's house. They found several cell phones on the table. They suspected Signe had used these phones to send secretly recorded videos and harassing messages to the victims. Further police investigation revealed that Signe and Roy had 2 children. However, 2 years prior, they had been involved in a serious car accident. Except for Signe, who miraculously survived, Roy and the 2 children perished. Strangely, judging from the state of the house, Signe continued to wash the children's clothes and kept track of their schedules. The entire house was filled with signs as if the children were still alive. This is a typical complex form of post-traumatic stress disorder (PTSD). Signe cannot accept the reality of her loved one's death. She traps herself in the delusions of the past, unable to escape. Her revenge was never for justice, but merely a way to find release from her own delusions. Furthermore, Emma was murdered not long after the car accident. The police suspect this was Signe's real motive. On Signe's home computer, they found videos of her interacting with the victims' children. It was Signe's manipulation of relationships that caused such extreme tension between the victims and their children. At this moment, Mark's superior receives a phone call. The police have received a report of Mary's disappearance. This is certainly Signe's doing. Mark's superior quickly contacts him and tells him to be extremely careful, but there was no signal where the log cabin was located. The phone kept saying Mark was out of coverage. Just then, the doorbell rang. Signe decisively pushed Mary into the nearby swimming pool. After Mark proved his police identity, he said he needed to check Signe's identification. Signe didn't refuse and enthusiastically invited Mark inside to wait a moment. Signe searched her bag but couldn't find her ID. Seeing her go inside, Mark secretly went to her bag to search. Mark was surprised by Signe's sudden attack. He quickly ran outside. Signe followed him. As she passed the pool, she deliberately glanced at Mary. Seeing Mary tied up and unable to move, she felt relieved and continued the chase. Mary, taking advantage of this time, struggled to reach the edge of the railing nearby, intending to use the iron railing to cut through the tape on her hands. Mark, having run a short distance, found a secluded place to hide. Meanwhile, Signe was leisurely singing that strange nursery rhyme. Seeing Signe getting closer, Mark frantically tried to crawl underwater, hoping the cover of the trees would prevent her from finding him. But she had grown up here since childhood and was very familiar with the place. Mark's movements underwater startled the birds in the trees. Signe could pinpoint Mark's location just by listening to their chirping. Even if he hid under the pier, she would still call his name softly, as if playing a game. He naturally didn't dare answer. Only when there was complete silence around them did Mark cautiously emerge. Unexpectedly, she had been waiting nearby. The two immediately engaged in a fierce struggle underwater. Facing a prepared Signe, Mark, already injured, was beaten beyond strength. Signe pinned Mark down. In his daze, he saw Naia, long dead, appear beside Signe. But when Mark looked closely, he realized it wasn't Naia, but Mary, who had escaped from the tape. She was consumed by a burning hatred for Signe's murder of her daughter and a furious rage at being deceived. She grabbed a sharp weapon nearby and stabbed Signe repeatedly until he was completely motionless. True revenge had finally paid the price. Considering Mary's actions constituted self-defense, she would likely only receive a 2-month prison sentence. She felt incredibly relieved about this. At this moment, she could finally calmly face everything. Mark also brought fresh flowers to Naia's grave. The serial murder case had been successfully solved, and he could finally provide an answer to Naia. The film ends here. Thank you for watching. Goodbye, and see you again.